We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Tesam and Beis Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 39b. And the previous summer of Nachman had said that when it comes to the bore, when it comes to the pits that are on the roads, that are made for the travelers, so the halacha is that has the status that it's owned by everybody b'shutfus. It's owned by everybody in partnership. And so now Rav is asking Rav Nachman from a Mishnah in Nedarim. The Mishnah here continues, Harei ato alai chayrim. Let's say somebody says a language, you are to me as a chayrim. So in that case, hanoder aser. So in that case, what's going on is the person who's making the neder, the person who's uttering the oath, he is aser to get any benefit from the other person. Rashi over here says, Harei ato alai chayrim hachi kamerle. Here's what he's saying to him. Harei mimoncha alai kistam charamim. Shehein lebedek habayis. Your mammon is like consecrated relative to me, like something that was consecrated to bedek habayis. Hilkach hanoder aser le'anus mishal hamuder. So in this case, the person saying the oath is aser to get any benefit from the person who he's talking to. Basically, we learn from a pasuk that a person is allowed to prohibit himself from getting benefit from the property of his friend. So that's the various languages. Now, if a person says the following, Hareini alecha viato alai. Let's say a person has the language of I am to you and you are to me. So in that case, shneim asurim zebozeh. So in that case, they're both also to get benefit from each other's property. However, the Mishnah continues, umutarin b'shel ole bavel. They're mutter to get any benefit from things that belong to the ole bavel. The idea is that things that belong to travelers are actually public property owned by nobody. Nobody has a share, and therefore those items are not considered as part of the prohibition because it's not owned by either individual. Vasurin b'shel oso ha'ir. But the Mishnah says it's also for them to get any benefit from something that's owned by the city they live in, because for things that are owned by the city, that's considered to be owned in partnership. So they're all considered to be partners. So since each person can't get benefit from the other person, they can't get benefit from those items as well. Rashi over here says, anything that was made by the people of the exile for the travelers, that was made hefker, it's ownerless. It's not a situation of partnership. Because if it was partnership, then one could aser his portion to the other. But here it's not considered partnership, it's considered hefker. Rashi continues, but if you're talking about the items that belong to the city, so again, that they could prohibit against each other. Shein Darenba, that's the city that they live in, because in those items, they're considered partners. So one person's going to be aser to partake because of the portion that's owned by the other. Again, they asered each other to derive benefit from one another. And the Mishnah continues, Ve'eluhein dvarim shel ole bavel. So the following are considered things of the ole bavel that are considered ownerless. So harabayis, halishkos, va'azaros, ubor shalem tzadderech. If you're talking about the Temple Mount, you're talking about the chambers and the courtyards of the temple, and you're talking about, let's say, again, a pit in the middle of the road that's for the travelers, those are all considered ownerless. And again, these individuals can get benefit because nobody really owns it, therefore they can't prohibit one to the other. The Eluhain shalos sayir, and the following are considered things that belong to the city, harachov, let's say the street, ubeis hakneses, the shul, ubeis hamerchatz, and the bathhouse. So again, those are all owned in partnership, and therefore they could prohibit one against the other. In any case, now Rava continues and asks Rav Nachman, "V'amert beiraj d'shutfihu." Now, if you're going to tell me that the pits, that the cisterns in the middle of the road, they're considered to be partnership, so am I mutter? So why is it mutter? It's not ownerless; it's considered partnership. One should be able to prohibit. V'atzanan, we learned in the Mishnah, hashutvin shenadru hanaz zemizeh. If you have partners that they make an oath not to get benefit from one another, so asurim likanes lechatzer lirchutz babur. So they're not allowed to go into the courtyard and bathe in the pit of water, because again, that's owned by partnership. Something owned by partnership is going to be a problem. And so the Gemara answers, lirchutz hachinami. When it comes to bathing in a pit that's owned in partnership, that indeed would be a problem. But here, what are we talking about? What's Rav Nachman talking about where he says you're allowed to take from the pit even though it's owned in partnership? Lamalos, we're talking about drawing water in order to drink from. Mar mididei kamamali, or mar mididei kamamali. We consider retroactively that whatever you take belonged to you all along. So what Rav Nachman is basically saying is, even though the pits for the travelers that were made to draw water really are owned in partnership, still in a situation where two people took a neder not to derive benefit one from the other, they're still allowed to draw the water from the pits, because when it comes to that particular water, once you draw it retroactively, we say it belonged to only you all along. Rashi over here says, When it says that if you have a pit in the middle of the road, it's mutter, that's not allowed for everything. For example, you won't be allowed to go and bathe in that pit, because it really does belong as a partnership. We only allowed that you can draw water to like drink from, because there we rely on breira. Again, it clarifies retroactively that it belonged to you all along. Whatever came in that person's jug, that was always to him all along, min hashamayim, that's considered his. It's not considered taking, so to speak, from the partnership. And the Gemara continues, V'savar Rav Nachman yesh breira. Does Rav Nachman really hold of the concept of breira? That's what we're saying over here. We're saying that when you're drawing the water retroactively, we understand that this water belonged to you all along. That assumes the concept of breira. Does Rav Nachman really hold that? But we learned in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Shkolim, and all of this will be explained by Rashi. Ha'achin ha'shutvin. Let's say you have brothers who are partners. So the principle is as follows. Kishachayavin bekalbon, when they're chayiv to pay the kalbon was a little additional money that you would have to pay with the machas hashekel. So then, peturim meiser behema, that indicates that they're really partners, and therefore they'd also be patur from giving meiser behema. Partners are not chayiv in meiser behema. Ukishachayavin b'meiser behema, but if it's a partnership where they're chayiv in meiser behema, so then peturim min kalbon, then you know that they're patur from kalbon. Again, Rashi's going to explain. V'yomer Ravanan, and Ravanan said on this Mishnah, Lo shanu ala shechilku gediyim keneged teloim, uteloim keneged gediyim. This is only true when they divided up, these two brothers divided up their inheritance. They divided it up, goats corresponding to sheep and sheep corresponding to goats. In other words, you take the gediyim, I'll take the teloim. Aval cholku gediyim keneged gediyim, uteloim keneged teloim. But if they divided up that each one takes some goats and each one takes some sheep, in other words, they divided goats against goats, you take one, I'll take one, you take one sheep, I'll take one sheep, etc. So Omer zeu chelko hamagio mishar rishon lakach. Then we say, whatever you got is what you were going to get all along. Sounds like the concept of breira. Rav Nachman Amar, and Rav Nachman says no. Afilu chalka gediyim keneged gediyim, utaloim keneged taloim. Even if you divide goats against goats and sheep against sheep, ein omer zechelko hamagio mishar rishona lekach. We don't say this is what you were going to get all along. In other words, it's pretty clear that Rav Nachman does not hold of breira. That's the question of the Gemara. Again, we'll go back to Rashi to see the details of what's going on over here. But in any case, this is a question because if Rav Nachman does not hold of breira, so how are we going to explain over here in the case of the boar, if this boar belongs to everybody as shutfin, as partners, so why are they allowed to draw the water if they're saying they're not allowed to derive benefit from one another? And so the Gemara says, Ella rather dekuli alma bira defkerahi. What you have to say is everybody agrees that the boar really is considered ownerless, it's considered hefker. Even Rav Nachman agrees that it's considered ownerless. And so then the question is, why does Rav Nachman say that if a person draws water for somebody else, it follows the tchum of the person that it's being drawn for? Again, if it's considered ownerless, it should follow the tchum of the person who's actually drawing the water. And so the Gemara says, Elohacha b'magbia metzia lechaveiro kamiflgi. The machlokus over here was, they're arguing about when one picks up a metzia for his friend. Mar savar kana, one holds he acquires it. Umar savar lo kana, one holds he does not acquire it. And Rashi will explain this as well. Rashi over here says, Ho'achim ha'shutvin, again, achim shein shutvin. We're talking about brothers who are partners, b'yerushas avian, meaning they're inheriting their father's property together. K'shachayavin bekalbon peturim mimaiser behemo, k'shachayavin b'maiser behemo peturim min akalbon, means as follows. Kol Yisrael huzkuku loses machas hashekel lekarbonos tzibor. All of Klal Yisrael, they have to give a machas hashekel each year for the public karbonos. V'itilu chacham malem lahosif ma ketana lios kalbon leprutrut. So the chachamim said, besides the machas hashekel, give a little bit extra money, an extra ma ketana, because that will be for the exchange, because they would have to exchange the money sometimes. There might be a little loss of money from hektish when they're exchanging coins. Therefore, everyone should give a little extra. The half shekel were very small coins. V'nochen la'abid, it was easy to lose them. Sometimes you would exchange them, and then you would give a little kalbon as part of the exchange. And the halacha was, even if two people, let's say instead of two people each giving a half shekel, they decide we'll give together, we'll give a full shekel. So still, even though they're giving a full shekel, you would think maybe they don't need the extra kalbon for security in case of a loss of money to hektish. Hitilu aleim shnei kalbonim. They still said you got to give 2 kalbons. Shelo lifchos mechavreim. You shouldn't get away with giving less than everybody else. Ulamait as a hekdesh to make hekdesh lose out. Aval ha'av shokel b'shvil shnei bonav. But there's one exception. If a father gives the shekel for 2 of his children, he can give shekel shalom. He can just give 1 shekel. Upater mikalbon shein. He's pater from giving that kalbon. So you see, that's one case where you don't have to give the kalbon. Now, Meiser Behema Noeg B'chol Shana B'vlodos HaNoladim. Now, Rashi also explains what's Meiser Behema. That's every year when you have newborn animals, Ve'eder Shel Shutfin Petur, and the halacha happens to be that if partners own the animal, you don't have to give Meiser Behema. You don't have to give every 10th animal to Hekdesh. Havlodos mi Meiser, G'ratani B'bechoros, Kol Peter, Sheger Behema Asher Yaloch, V'lo Shel Shutfitz. It's learned from a pasuk. It has to belong to you, not partners. Uparchinon V'ha B'bechor Ksiv. The Gemara over there asks, that's not talking about Meiser Behema, it's talking about Bechor. We already know that Bechor is chayiv by partnership. So Tanei Uinyan LeMeiser must be the pasuk talking about Meiser. Yachol afilu kanu b'tfisas habayis kego nachem shlo yispiku lachlok yerushasan ad shenoldu lehem v'lados tamid lomer yiyah. It says, I might think that's true of an inheritance as well. Is that also considered a partnership? No, that's not considered a partnership. And so therefore it comes out as follows. Hilkach therefore achim shein shutvin sheshutfosein la'achar chaluka. Let's say you have brothers who didn't just inherit, but they became partners, meaning they divided up. Kagon shechazru v'nishtatvu. They divided up their property, and then they said, let's make ourselves a partnership. So chayavin bekalbon keshar shnayim hamischabrin l'shekel shalim. They're chayav in kalbon just like any other situation of a partnership. Upeturim mi meiser behema, and they're also patur from meiser because that's a regular partnership. In other words, the brothers divided up their inheritance, and then they recombined everything as a partnership. The shutvin bial maninu, they're considered normal partners. The badlalot tfisa bias, the original inheritance is over. But the other way around, let's say they're chayiv in meiser behema, meaning they're not really partners. They're just partners in the sense that the Yerusha all came to them. In other words, you still have the original inheritance. They both have inherited all the property, and they haven't done any division. So in that case, they're not really considered partners. So Peturim and Akalbon, in that case, they're actually patur from Kalbon, Ki'ilu Haya Avi and Kaim, just like when their father was alive, if he would have given on behalf of his sons, he would not be Chayiv in Kalbon. Shemamon and Echad or Potron Yachad. They're all considered one, it's all considered one group of money, one pot of money, and it's patur. So again, in the case where they're patur from Kalbon, so that's a situation where it's not really partnership, so then they're chayiv in Meiser Behema. In a case where they're patur from Meiser Behema, meaning it's a true partnership, then they're going to, in that case, they're patur from Meiser Behema, then they're actually going to be chayiv in Kalbon, because again, that's a regular, normal partnership. And Rashi continues, V'yomer Avanan lo shanu b'shvil chaluka botla tfisa b'ais minayu. This is only true that if they divide up the property, then recombine, we say that the original Yerusha is done, and it's a partnership. That's only true. The idea is, if you're going to exchange one animal for a different animal, you take this kind of animal, I'll take that kind of animal, that's already like purchasing from one another. That's a real division. And now, if they go and decide to reformulate the partnership, that's no different than buying individual property and then joining together as partners. The original inheritance is finished. That's considered a partnership. But let's say they just do a normal way of dividing. You take one sheep, I'll take the other sheep. You take one gedi, I'll take the other gedi. That's a normal way of doing inheritance. Everyone takes a portion of each kind. Then we say already, yesh breirer. Then we say whatever you took, that was breirer, that was yours all along. Now they're still considered to be inheritors. And now if they go and reformulate a partnership and say we both own everything, so it actually goes back to the original inheritance. That's not considered a partnership. It's like they never divided. In other words, if they divide in the normal fashion, we apply the principle of Breira. We say they each inherited whatever they took. And then if they decide to recombine, we say it's like they never divided at all. And so therefore, again, that shows that we're talking about Breira. And Rav Nachman disagreed. Ein Omer Mupater. Rav Nachman said that's not true. Alma Ein Breira. Rav Nachman said no, even in a situation where they divide, let's say, Gedi Keneged Gedi, we don't say Breira. And we say if they recombine, we say it is considered a partnership. That's why Rashi says, according to Rav Nachman, it must be the bor is considered hefker. From the fact that the people who said they weren't going to derive benefit from one another, from the fact they're permitted in the bor, it must be it's considered hefker because you can't resort to breira anymore. So now we have to give another answer. And so the Gemara again says, according to Rav Nachman, the bor is considered hefker. So how come if I draw the water for somebody else, it follows his tchum? The moment I draw the water, it should belong to me. It should follow my tchum. And so the Gemara says, they're arguing what is the halacha when you pick up a metzia, it is hefker. But they're arguing, Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes on the previous Amud are arguing what happens if you pick up something hefker for your friend. They're not arguing if the friend acquires it. That's not true. They're not arguing whether the other person acquires it. That's certainly everyone agrees. Because if you're going to say that, then you're going to say, according to Rav Nachman, that if I pick up something that's hefker from my friend acquires it, that would actually be a contradiction to Rav Nachman and Bab Metzia. Rav Nachman says clearly, together with Rav Chisda, that if you pick up a Metzia for your friend does not acquire it. So that's not the issue. Everybody agrees. Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, Rav Chisda, they all agree that if you pick up a Metzia for your friend does not acquire it. So what are they arguing about? They're arguing when you pick up something for your friend certainly does not acquire it, but do you acquire it? That's the machlokus. Everyone agrees your friend does not acquire it. The machlokus Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is, do you acquire it, the person picking it up? Rav Nachman Rav Nachman says, your friend does not acquire it, but you don't acquire it either, because you're not intending on acquiring it. Rather, what happens is you pick it up, you don't acquire anything, you give it to your friend, he acquires it, and then it follows his tchum according to Rav Nachman. Because he acquires it through pulling it, through picking it up. When he receives it. When it comes to his reshus. And he has proper intention to acquire. And all we were saying was, according to Rav Nachman, when you pick it up for your friend, if it doesn't yet get to your friend, so it doesn't belong to him yet, you could change your mind still and say, I want it for myself. But once you give it to him, then he acquires it. Like we said, if you give it to the guy and then you say after you give it to the guy, oh, I want it, that's too late already. At that point, the second person gets it. But Rav Sheshes says, no, if you pick up something for your friend does not acquire it, and you actually acquire it immediately. And when you give it to your friend, it's going from the person who picked it up to the person who's receiving it. That's what Rav Sheshes says. It follows the tchum of the person who drew the water. So in any case, according to this approach, both Rav Sheshes and Rav Nachman agree that the waters of the pit are considered ownerless. The machlokas only is when you pick it up on behalf of your friend, do you acquire it first and then you give it to your friend? Or do you not acquire it at all, and it only is acquired by your friend when he finally receives it? And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha hayu peirosa be'ir acheres. Let's say somebody had his fruits in another city. V'irvu b'nei osa ha'ir. And so the people of that city, they made an eruv tchum, l'havi etzlo mi peirosav, in order to bring him his fruits. So the halach is, lo yaviolo, they're not allowed to bring him his fruits, because the fruits, they have his tchum. They don't have the tchum of the people of the city. Like we said, the property has the tchum of the owner, and therefore they can't bring it to him. Now, if he himself made such an eruv, peiros of kamo, then his fruits follow his tchum, and of course they can bring it to him. Rashi over here says, lo yaviu mi peiros, they can't bring his fruits to him. Hoel v'hu lo eruv l'sham dehakol karagli abalim, because he himself didn't make an eruv to go to that city, and the fruit follows his tchum. V'im eruv hu lo leches l'sham. Now, if he did make an eruv to go there, peiros of kamo, then his fruits follow his tchum. Umuter l'havim, you could bring the fruits there, because again, the fruits follow the same tchum as the owner. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Amud Aleph.